What's the most wholesome thing a stranger has done for you? Just this week, I fell asleep on my morning commute and nearly missed my stop. All of us on the early express bus are technically strangers but know each other based on our unofficial assigned seats. ECT. Well, one guy rushed to wake me up. The other asked the bus driver to wait. The bus driver himself was like, "Doesn't someone get off here?" And when I nearly forgot my coat in my race to get off, they passed it forward. It was incredibly kind and considerate. I brought Kit Kats for them the next day in thanks. Reminds you that you have a village even when you don't know it. Edit 1. This was in the USA. Our bus starts at Port Authority in NYC and goes through Hackensack, NJ. Yes, we are all New Yorkers who reverse commute into Jersey for work. Edit 2. Thank you for the silver. Kind strangers. Edit 3. Oh man. Gold. You're all great people and are now my Valentines. Have a great weekend. There's a spot in the building I work at that nobody wants to work in. It's the coldest area in the building because there's an opening that doesn't close and doesn't have heat, so you can't even eat food safely because the wind will blow it away. I was moved from where I usually am and wasn't prepared for how cold it would be there. I could barely handle money because my fingers felt frozen. A customer noticed how cold it was and without even asking if I was cold, he took off his gloves and gave them to me. I have no idea what his name was, but it was the most thoughtful thing a complete stranger has ever done for me. I still have the gloves too. The guy next to me on a plane once woke me up when the flight attendant came around with ice cream and got an ice cream so that I could have two. I'll never forget that man. He helped me change a flat tire, recommended a place for me to go to the next day to get it checked out. When I got there the next morning, he had stopped by to drop off his business card and to tell them to take good care of my vehicle. When they called me to tell me that the car was ready, they also told me that he had paid for the new tire. Still can't believe it. You don't get people who do that for someone they have never met before. I worked at a gas station at the time. I'd gotten myself a pretty large burn on one arm, helping someone lift a grill after it had been used, and he dropped it without warning. A customer saw my arm, bought her stuff and came back 5 minutes later. She'd gotten me an aloe vera plant so I could break off pieces of it and rub on my burn. I thought that was pretty wholesome. When I was around 17, I got in my first car accident. It was snowing and very icy, and I was driving home from work. It was evening, but still fairly light because the snow reflected a decent amount of light from the street lamps. I slid on the ice and lost some control of my car. I hit the one in front of me. Not super hard, but enough to dent their back bumper and scratch my front bumper. Since it was my first accident, I sort of uncontrollably panicked and started crying even though it wasn't that bad. We pulled over and put our lights on. An older couple, probably in their 60s, got out of the car and assessed the damage. I got out, crying and profusely apologizing. The wife immediately was like, "Oh honey, is this your first car accident?" and gave me a little half hug. She asked her husband to grab her purse and got me some tissues from it to wipe away my tears. She said it was no big deal at all, just some scratches. She understood it was a true accident and that I hadn't been driving recklessly, even though I hit them and dented their car. They took care of me and I will never forget it. It's kind of fresh in my mind right now because my daughter is going through driver's training. Of course I hope she never gets in an accident, but if she does, I hope she is lucky enough to receive the same understanding from someone. I was sitting alone at the cafeteria and a teacher came up to me and gave me food that she bought for me. I didn't know who she was. She has never taught me. In college, flying to visit my father for spring break. The airport was 45 minutes away from campus and I didn't have a car. After my ride left, the flight was delayed until the next day, and the airline said that because I lived nearby I didn't qualify for a hotel room for the night. A lovely couple gave me their hotel room voucher, as they decided to drive through the night instead. It helped me out when I was in a really tight spot. Actually, it was a Redditor. I was a really poor college student. I worked 20 hours a week, but got cut back to 10 hours. Rent also increased. I didn't qualify for low-income aid like food stamps because grants for tuition at school counts as income. It's dumb. I had a hard time affording groceries and even meat. My meals consisted of eating cucumbers and bananas and rice crackers. I had broth and pasta and stuff, but I was getting way thinner. I'm already a short and skinny girl at under 100 pounds, and was getting skinnier and way weaker. Like walking upstairs hurt and would leave me feeling exhausted. We met up and he bought me groceries, lots of meat, and even cooked for me. When I took the first bite of the steak he cooked, I literally cried and embarrassed myself. He would send me every now and then a delivery of Amazon groceries. I'm still in touch with that person and very grateful. It was a really hard time in my life. A stranger who used to be a customer at my job took me aside once and told me she has seen my journey over the years and is so proud of me. She started crying and gave me a hug. I wish I could tell her how much that meant to me. I was at a concert a while back. I'm a very short guy and I was somewhere in the middle of the crowd windmilling the fuck out, not really caring about not being able to see, just enjoying the music, etc. The guy standing next to me was an absolute giant of a man with hands as big as spades. Suddenly, he reaches out and takes me in his monster-sized mitts. I'm thinking the worst at this moment, maybe I've pissed him off with my relentless windmilling. But he simply lifts me into the air and plops me onto his shoulders so I can watch the rest of the set with a premium view. When the set concluded, he let me down like a toddler and simply nodded at me when I thanked him. Edit. This really blew up. I am small, about 5'8" and 10 stone or something. But this guy was seriously gargantuan. He was an absolute hero and I always remember people like this in times of need to remind myself of all the good people out there. The band was Devil Driver. Windmilling means headbanging in a circular fashion so your hair whips around like a windmill. I had just moved to a new town and had started a brand new job at a high school a few towns over. I lived 40 minutes away from my work, and it was the first day of school for students. I went to start my car that morning and it wouldn't turn on. The engine had died. I had no way of getting to work and I started to panic. I wanted to make a good impression at my new school and it was my first professional job out of college. There was no way I would be able to find coverage in time and it was the first day for students and a brand new job for me. Not a good look if I didn't show up. I didn't know anyone yet to call and this was before Uber was around. One of my new neighbors who was retired and also up super early walking their dog saw me outside of my car on the verge of a meltdown. They insisted on driving me to work that morning. They refused money for gas. They didn't let me feel guilty about the distance or the situation and told me they were so happy to help. BC, they didn't have anything else going on that day. I was able to make it to my new job on time and everything else fell into place that day. I later found out that they were actually in the middle of a big move and were in the process of moving across the country that week since they had just retired. I still get emotional thinking about that morning and the overabundant kindness shown to me that day. When I was in my early 20s, I ran out of gas 2 blocks from a gas station and had no money. A man came up to my car with a jug of gas and filled my car for me. I asked him for a way to pay him back and he said, "I have a daughter your age and I know how hard it is. Merry Christmas." And he walked away. I will always remember this man. So nice. So giving. A guy in France, I asked for directions. Not only he walked me to the place, but he also kept me company and chatted while I visited it. He left after 15 minutes though because he had an appointment. I ran out of gas on a dirt road in New Mexico. No one around and miles from town. A guy picked me up, drove me to the gas station and then all the way back out to my truck. He also refused money when I offered it and said, "Just make sure you help someone when they need it." When I was working as a cashier, an older man pulled out $1 and asked if I wanted to see something cool. Slightly skeptical, I said sure. He folded it into a little shoe and gave it to me, and it was the cutest thing. Then he told me, "Well, you can't just have one shoe," and folded another into a second shoe, and I still have them on my desk because I didn't have it in me to unfold them. Not me, but my sister. She got severely sunburned while on holidays in Sri Lanka. We thought she was feeling better as she spent the whole previous day in bed. We went on a trip to a waterfall in the jungle. We were friends with locals who brought us. After swimming in the water, her skin starts burning to the point where she is in tears and won't let anyone touch her. We have nothing to help her. Maybe 5 minutes later, some local villagers appear with aloe vera plants and proceed to gently rub it onto her skin. Total strangers who saw the situation went to their house and brought the aloe vera. It was so kind, I couldn't believe it. We ended up talking to them and they made us all dinner, which we ate together from a bucket in the middle of the jungle. Unforgettable. Many years ago, when my brother and I were traveling to Finland on a whim and most places were booked out, a Finnish student we encountered and asked for a youth hostel spontaneously let us sleep in her dorm's living room for a few days. She even gave up her own dorm room for us and stayed at her estranged husband's place. She showed us around, bought us some typical Finnish food and sweets, and was just incredibly nice towards two naive foreigners. We stayed in contact for a bit until she went abroad, and sadly I never managed to find her again. This was before Facebook and she had a very common name, but I hope she knows how much I appreciated her kindness. Up until high school, I didn't attend much art classes due to having to attend a different school for advanced classes. So in terms of creativity, I was far behind my peers. This became frustrating for me once I realized I much preferred art and literature over science, which my classes focused on. I ended up having to teach most of the basics to myself. I would spend most of my spare time doodling and practicing my art techniques. This meant all my lunches were dedicated to it. In my junior year, towards the end of the school year, when the art teachers told us there was X amount of spaces left in his exhibition for the student work and we can submit our own projects that weren't graded, I spent countless hours creating my piece for it. In the end, though, I wasn't good enough for my work to make it in and I was crushed. I was so frustrated and upset that I stopped trying. A few weeks later, after not touching a sketchbook since, a senior, who I have never spoken with but sat at the end of my lunch table time to time, came up behind me on his way to a class and set a piece of paper down in front of me with a drawing on it and a little caption saying, "I like your work. Keep on drawing." He graduated a week later, so I never got to thank him properly, but it was the thing that helped me to push past my first big failure. Edit. Some people wanted to see my work. Unfortunately, I'm still unpacking from a move, so most of my stuff is stored in a flash drive or box somewhere. But here's some okayish looking ones I found on my phone. Pick 1, pick 2. A year or two ago I was on a long road trip, doing about 90 on the highway. There was a guy behind me for at least 2 hours, not tailing me, but we were both going about the same speed. Out of nowhere he speeds up like crazy, cuts me off and then slows down to the speed limit right in front of me. I had to slam the brakes and I was really pissed off. Not even a minute later we drove past a cop. After we passed the cop he speeds up to 80 to 90 again. He must have been using a GPS that alerted him to police on the road, and he was nice enough to cut me off so I wouldn't get a speeding ticket. Was really awesome. I had a relationship go south and I ended up taking our 10-year anniversary trip to a foreign country alone. I met a local in one of the cities I stayed in and she hung out with me all day. Showed me the lay of the land. Bought me a couple beers. And gave me a smooch at the end of the day. She was cool. Was spending a summer in Vancouver. I was doing some food shopping with my girlfriend. But we both weren't sure if we'd been paid yet. Got to the till with all our stuff. $100 worth. And as you can expect, both our cards got declined. As I was apologizing to the cashier, a woman behind us walked right up and stuck her card in the machine. I tried to tell her there was no need, but she insisted, saying, "Someone did something really nice for me today, and I'm just paying it forward." Was so stunned by this. Tried to get her details to pay her back, but she just smiled, said it was nothing and went on her way. One of the kindest things anyone has ever done for me. Thank you, random Canadian lady. Thank you. I was a single dad with 3 kids. 9, 7, and 3 years old. Flying from DTW to DFW. So many random women offered to help me. One offered to help through security. Another offered to take my daughter to the bathroom. One offered to buy us food. It was so crazy. It almost restored my faith in humanity. Then I saw a single mother struggling with her kids and no one was offering to help, and it just reminded me that people think men are incompetent and not able to care for many humans. Cynicism successfully restored. I was in Paris and got into a huge fight with someone I cared about. We bolted in different directions. I jumped on a crowded metro headed for my hotel and wept. Many people stared, but one dear woman fished a tissue out of her purse for me. It was really simple, but it meant a lot. I had been sent to live in temporary housing out of state by California Social Services. It turned out to be a hoarder den, meth house. I posted about the house on TikTok and gained a lot of followers. One of the followers, a total stranger, offered to help and drove 3 states away to rescue myself and the dog who had adopted me. She is currently helping me navigate her state's social services programs in order to help me get my own housing. I will always appreciate her. I've told this story before, but this has stuck with me for over 20 years now. When I was a kid, we didn't have a lot of money, so we often shopped at thrift stores. What I loved about that was that you could get 10 books for $1. So I would plant myself in front of the book section and make piles of which one I wanted to get, and then decided after I'd gone through them all. One day an older lady saw me sitting with my piles and asked if I liked to read. I told her I did and showed her a few of the books I found that I liked. She smiled and then pulled $1 out of her purse, handed it to me and said, "Promise me that you'll keep reading." I was so happy and immediately stood up and said that I would. She smiled and walked away and I went back to my piles, able to pick out an extra 10 books to take home. It was just a small act of kindness for her. But for me, having a random stranger encourage my love of reading and making me promise never stop definitely had a lot to do with my continued love of reading. That in turn definitely helped shape who I am today as a writer. So she had a big effect on my life and I still think of her whenever I buy a new book. My senior year in high school, I stole my lunch every day. I was essentially on my own by then due to reasons and completely broke. I thought I was getting away with it for the entire year. Towards the end of the year, the dean called me into the office and explained that they knew I was stealing lunches the whole time. He then gave me a number to enter that would cover my meals. He told me not to worry about all the food, it was being covered by a faculty member. I never knew who it was exactly, but I suspect it was an elderly English teacher I had. She was always trying to sneakily give me cash and refused to let me deny. She even offered to loan me her new BMW when I made a comment about not having money for gas. I loved her. Edit. Words. I was traveling one time and full of anxiety. I had to catch a plane later that day, but had to take 2 trains to get to the city whence it was leaving. I was alone in a foreign country with no friendly faces. Then I overheard this one woman at the train stop where I was waiting, speaking a similar language to mine, and I sort of latched onto her the whole way to my next stop. When we got there, I didn't know where to go, so she helped me find the right platform. We were told that the departure of the train I was supposed to take had to be delayed. I freaked out. The woman helped me find the help desk and get the information I needed in case the train left too late for me to get to the airport on time. But not only that, she also gave me €250 in case I had to buy a new ticket. This woman was a complete stranger and she just handed me hundreds of dollars. The train ended up leaving like 10 minutes behind schedule, and I was so scared I wouldn't make it that I was reluctant to board. But she assured me it would be okay and convinced me to get on. The travel agency helped me out by contacting the airport and had them hold the plane for me. I made it onto the plane. But if it hadn't been for this woman, I might have ended up stranded in a big city, in a foreign country, with no money.